The pirates. There is a pounding in his head and his mouth is bone dry. He's been snoring again. There is softness and warmth and he snuggles into it deeper. The resulting purring lets him know it's Mabby. More and more arms are wrapped around him and he settles back in again. The pounding subsides and he can feel some kind of gunk on his eyes. But he doesn't care. He needs more rest. He fades back in a while later as he can feel people moving around. Smith has curled around his stomach and is squirming as she's trying to untangle herself from the mess. So, are you going to actually do something before noon, or are you just riding off this morning? Who let the mad bomber in? Someone asks as the movement increases and he rises up. Franklin opens his eyes and looks over to see the French demolitionist sipping at a coffee as he stares at him like a goddamn psychopath. Do you need something? Franklin demands, and then flinches as the nearby curtains are opened by Nishi. He rubs at his eyes and the axiom shifts and wavers as the gunk isn't wiped away, but transformed into raw energy. That's like using a chainsaw to open a letter. Jean-Luc chides him. You'd do it if you had half the brains needed, Franklin replies as he rolls his head and his neck makes all sorts of interesting popping sounds. What do you want? Some explanation. You spammed the entire team with coordinates and pictures that were too dark to make anything out. Oh, sorry, I was kind of manic after overdoing the Axiomed caffeine. Was it any better than last time? Are we still in the initial 24 hours of my drinking the stuff? I assume so, unless you had some before the raid on Thunder Thought's home. Jean-Luc answers, and Franklin slowly shakes his head as he smacks his lips to try and get some moisture back in his mouth. No. Which means I've got it down to, we're not at noon yet? You've got a half hour till noon. Jean-Luc answers, 18 hours. Marked improvement from the last time, Franklin says, although it feels just as god-awful. Franklin, what the hell are these coordinates? Ships, seams, veins, ruins, labs, who knows? I went through the oceans around the islands as fast as I could and used axiom pings to find concentrations of metal. It could be anything that involves a huge amount of metal in any one area. Okay, nice, why? Jean-Luc asks. I wasn't just energized by that caffeine, I was manic, so I focused on figuring something out. How much confusion you could spread? Jean-Luc asks. No, stupid, how much I could find. How many coordinates did I give out? 13. We confirmed that 3 of them are deep-sea fish nurseries that fell into disuse some generations ago due to the gangs. Cool. Even if the gears rusted clean through the location should still be good for farming more exotic fish. Franklin notes as he rises fully and his back seems to more crunch than crack. It sounds for a moment like someone stepped on a bag of chips. Dry mouth, gunky eyes, headache, dehydration, and stiffness. Yep, that's a caffeine crash. You just warped in above the bed and fell in. Smith tells him. It was strange as all hell. You owe us one, Nip, Mabby says as she saunters past, giving him a quick lick on the cheek and then a nip on the lip as she does so. But don't worry, you'll like how we take our pay. Can't we just cuddle? Franklin jokes. After, she says, and he chuckles. See you then. Unfortunately, business before pleasure, Franklin says as Jean-Luc holds out a communicator to him. Wait, what's that glowing bit? Basically what happens when an anglerfish fucks a crocodile. Jean-Luc replies and Franklin pauses and thinks. The coordinates have it in walking distance of my house. Walking distance if you could walk straight down through ever darker water after walking a kilometer offshore into the cold ocean. Franklin replies as he pulls in axiom and calms down the raging demands of his body. Let's keep talking while I get something to eat. You hungry? Are politicians untrustworthy? Jean-Luc asks. Most people ask if bears shit in the woods. Franklin replies, some live in zoos, so no, not all of them. You do know that as a baron, you're a politician too, right? Does it change anything? Jean-Luc demands, and Franklin slowly turns that over in his head. You know what? No, I'm not touching that, Franklin says as they start down the hallway. Then he pauses and takes a few steps back. There is an enormous sea monster filleted and drying in the sun. I was 90% sure that was just a dream. Nope, you engaged in some recreational monster hunting while manic. Jean-Luc says with a grin. Really? Wait, there were like 8 of them that I grabbed. You donated them to the nearest farming communities to do with as they will, Jean-Luc says. Well, at least I'm still civic-minded while manic. Yes, bien qui, suivre moi, Jean-Luc says, and he shows a casual knowledge of Franklin's home. Well, I suppose it makes sense that you know your way to my kitchen, Franklin says as he follows Jean-Luc in. A coffee is held out to him and he takes a sniff of it. It's just black coffee, nothing too bad. Mon Dieu, what are you doing? Jean-Luc asks as numerous drawers open and so does the nearby fridge. Ingredients fly out as Franklin drinks a bit of room into his mug. He then holds it out, and the Frenchman is left staring in horrified awe as ingredients fly into the drink. You're a madman. You're just catching on? Franklin asks with a raised eyebrow and an easy grin. Are you sure your name ends with a Lin and not an Enstein? Jean-Luc demands as raw egg flows into Franklin's coffee. Mostly, Franklin replies, although Frankenstein is a last name, so it doesn't really work. Not my point, Jean-Luc says as Franklin takes a sip of the drink and nods. He then begins to stare. That can't possibly taste good. It's not about taste, it's about what it does for you. This is a relatively low caffeine way of getting the equivalent of jet fuel in your system, Franklin says and then smiles as Jean-Luc sighs, puts his coffee aside and then holds out his hand. He hands it off and Jean-Luc takes a slight sip from the opposite side of the mug. Franklin outright chuckles as the Frenchman gags and then struggles to swallow. But shortly after he does, he suddenly twitches and then shudders before standing up even straighter than before. Why don't you just use that witch's brew instead of whatever Axiom madness you did to yourself yesterday? The first time I toyed with Axiom in my drinks, I did use this. That's what got me pinballing through the solar system on a caffeine high for nearly 3 days. Yesterday was a weak, milky coffee with the same effect. You left a palm print on 3 separate moons, Jean-Luc says and Franklin shrugs. It was too much. Now, if there was something to do when I had that insane energy, then it would have been done and wrapped up with a little bow on it. Yes, well, people tend to invade when you don't want them to, not when you do. A Frenchman would know, Franklin quips. Yes, we would, and Jean-Luc says. Look, you're clearly awake now, so I'll spell it out. You've uncovered a lot of potential hotspots yesterday, and a lot of them are really close to where the guys have set down shop. Almost all of them are an easy distance of someone. Duh, Franklin says as he throws caution to the wind and throws back his entire concoction. He goes through about 5 different strained faces and lets out a bluh before putting it down. Okay, so what are you actually questioning? Or do you really not see the obvious? Spell it out. Communities and towns are naturally built in locations with access to resources. Be it the resource of an easy path of transport, something to eat, or something to sell, that's a universal rule. You build a town where it gets you something to have a town there. It's much the same for a lab or temporary shelter. Furthermore, some mining communities might be built in areas with high metal concentration. So finding a huge chunk of metal nearby is not only expected, but good news. If you put it like that, it makes it sound like I'm unreasonable to be here, Jean-Luc says softly as he takes a sip of his drink. Franklin has already levitated out several leafy greens, a loaf of bread, and slices of meat from the fridge. You want a sandwich? Do you have proper mustard or just the yellow paste? Get out of my house. You're going to have to make me, Jean-Luc replies with narrowed eyes. The glare continues for a second before he snorts in amusement. Yellow mustard's fine. Please and thank you. In short order, both men are munching on sandwiches, and Jean-Luc slides a data slate over to Franklin, who grabs it and starts scanning. Ah, so I stuck my foot into the planning stages of finding the damn things. Whoops, Franklin says. That's it? Whoops. I can't exactly go back in time and stop myself from finding things. We've got some pissed off professors and slighted students. Then they can all grow up and roll with things, Franklin says, and Jean-Luc sighs. Look, I know you don't really care so long as things get done. But stepping on everyone's toes and making them look stupid or irrelevant is a good way of getting resentment. So you need to at least apologize to the women for taking work like this from them, Jean-Luc says. What? Franklin demands. You spam texted everyone with the coordinates while Miles was negotiating, and a nosy student spotted it and didn't keep her mouth closed, Jean-Luc says, and Franklin gives him a very odd look. They're really being that stupid about it? If they're not, then they gave me the impression they are, Jean-Luc says. The students at any rate are pissy. Why? Training and learning for years, a chance to finally put it to use, and then some half-crazy idiot does all the work for you even as you're hearing about the job. Jean-Luc says before shrugging, or don't. I don't know how much you care about your image. I don't care about my image. I care about my actions, Franklin states. And that is why you make a terrible politician, Baron Smith. Considering how untrustworthy they all are, I'll take that as a compliment, Franklin says. Just be careful. I was in your bedroom for 10 minutes before you woke up. I had to speak for you to know I was there. You might be able to reach out and touch someone from anywhere in the solar system, from anywhere else in it. But a knife in the dark kills you just as dead as me. Summarize this for me, Franklin says. Make more friends, Franklin. Apologizing will help with that. Great. People, Franklin says before taking a bite out of his sandwich. He chews for a bit and swallows. You know, it's not that I hate people. I know. I just don't get them. I know I'm the weird one. But they seem insane. They drown in ego, follow patterns that clearly only lead to more pain, and talk about nothing over and over again. It's madness. I know everyone has their own hobbies and dreams and desires. But am I the only living being with pattern recognition? Does no one pay attention to the world around them? Franklin asks. What you see that seems so great and important. The things that seem so terrible for you. Most people don't think is all that bad. You see a sticky end? Everyone else sees a fun ride with a bit of cleanup. You need to trace the wire the whole way to see if it's attached to the timer, the detonator, or the payload, Jean-Luc says. I'll take your advice for it, Mr. Social. Franklin says, hiding a slight yawn. Christ, I'm getting tired already. I need to stop secluding myself. I'm losing my social stamina. You said it. Jean-Luc agrees. Franklin all but inhales his sandwich and grabs a glass of water to wash it down. I'll visit them today then. The sooner the ruffled feathers are soothed, the sooner it stops being a problem. It's not just a simple, oh, never mind, you're not listening, and you're not explaining. So it comes up to a big nothing. All right, social situations aren't just a simple game of tic-tac-toe or chess. You can't just do one thing and always get the same answer. I know that, which is why it's not going to be like a vending machine where you can just insert the right thing and get what you want out of it. These are people, and apologizing just to shut someone up is only insulting, Jean-Luc says, and Franklin runs a hand through his hair. It's grown out enough for him to tie back in a ponytail. I'll get my coat. Smack me in the back of my head if I start screwing up. Although I still don't get it why people are getting pissy. You're making them feel useless just as they're starting to feel like they're worth something. It's not a direct insult, but it's still an insult, Jean-Luc says, and Franklin pauses. And how the hell do you apologize for that? Ask for their help, Jean-Luc offers, and Franklin just gives him an odd look. He's not sure what question to ask first. But there are a lot of them.